All right. Well, we are about to get started here with our Auxano future casting webinar. It's great to see everybody continuing to jump in here this morning. I'm going to start our show here, presentation. And man, we are excited and thankful that you have chosen to join us this morning again on our Auxano future casting webinar. With Michael Kelley, special guest this morning. We'll get to introduce him in just here a second. Let me remind you of a few things. We do this every time. Reminder to be open to new thinking or ideas. Let the Lord speak to you, maybe challenge you, maybe inspire you in some way or another. Part of that's going to have to include eliminating distractions. So other windows, other things going on in the background. We're all at home in some level or another. And so maybe it is just kind of taking a minute to close the door, do whatever you need to do to really dial in and focus here. Drop your name, city, and state in the chat. We'd love to know who you are and where you're from. So in the chat box, we're going to make good use of that along the way. Go ahead and drop your name, your city, state in the chat so that we can see who you are and where you're from and engage in some good dialogue there. We're also going to use that chat for Q&A. And so as we go through this, Bob, who's backstage with us, helping administer this webinar, and I will be curating and calling through chat things. And so we'll get some good discussion going, hopefully, along the way and for sure at the end of our webinar this morning. I'd also encourage you to take notes. We are going to send you a replay. We're going to send out all the content as we typically do, but there's something to be said about not just waiting for that webinar replay, but taking good notes in the moment. And so we want you to do that. We've prayed up and really looking forward to serving you guys today. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we have with us special guest Michael Kelley. Michael's a Lifeway Senior Vice President. Michael, why don't you ring in here and give us kind of a snapshot of who you are and what you do there at Lifeway?
Yeah, well, thank you guys for the invitation. It's my pleasure to join you this morning. So yeah, Michael Kelley, Senior Vice President of the Church Ministries team. So the Church Ministries team is everything that we do at Lifeway that relates most directly to the church. So it includes our Lifeway Kids Ministry, student ministry, adult ministry, women's ministry, and so all the Bible studies and events and camps and training and all that kind of thing that goes along with all those different age groups. So excited to be here with you guys and looking forward to the content.
Love it. Thanks, Michael. And we appreciate you taking some time in what I know is a very busy season with camps and other events going on to really share with us some content that our Auxano team had a little bit of a preview to about a month or so ago. And so I'm really excited to do that. Again, my name is Brian Rose. I'm on the Auxano team, one of our senior lead navigators working with churches in a full-time capacity on site. Even recently, you know, I know some of you are in places where it may not be a lot going on outside of your homes, but we are blessed to be able to spend a lot of time with church leaders right now, helping really create that breakthrough clarity and fuel their ministry. That is, of course, a component of Lifeway. If you have not been to the new lifeway.com, Michael, this is just a great redesign of the website. I've watched and tracked over that the last few months, and man, I see it really pointed more towards ministry leaders than ever before. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's really what we're trying to do is zero in on that. I mean, for us, the way we often talk about it is it's the difference between multiplication and addition, right? So we want to be able to speak directly, not just to individuals, but we really want to be able to speak directly to difference makers. So we want to help disciple makers make disciples. And frankly, the redesign of the website has been something it's been a long time coming. We've needed to do it for a long time, and so it's looking a lot better. It's functioning a lot better, and then some of the functionality is still yet to come to make it more simple than it ever has been before to actually find things that are there.
I love it. You guys are doing a great job. I love the way it looks. So much, more intuitive laid out. Also, just putting the Auxano website up there. We've got some fun stuff going on, especially the Church Next survey. If you want to gauge, kind of what the preferences are in this next season, this is a really easy, low entry way to do that right there at auxano.com. You can hit that. Hey, Michael, I want to hit a couple of kind of data points before we jump into kind of these 3 truths that have been revealed by the COVID season. This just came out from Lifeway Research back in February. Back then, half of Protestant churchgoers, 51%, did not attend any in-person church services in January. I know everybody kind of we network with and work alongside had a pretty strong Easter, but there's still that sense of we don't really know what in-person worship is going to look like as we move forward. Are you hearing the same thing?
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of that has to do clearly with the area of the country that you're in.
Right.
Those stats are going to ebb and flow depending on where you are. And of course, if you think back to December and January, December was when we started to see another rise in COVID. It was
Right.
before vaccines had been largely rolled out. So, there's a lot of different ways you can take that. You can take that statistic. One of them, the more discouraging way, but potentially the more truthful way, is that for a lot of people, even though they had the opportunity to be there in person, they chose not to for various reasons.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're seeing as we're out kind of walking alongside church leaders on site, that there are still some questions about, if people aren't coming back on site, why aren't they? This could be part of it. The second stat here, just look back 2 years ago, about almost half of churchgoers had not watched a live stream church service instead of attending in person. They hadn't kind of said, hey, listen, let's watch online. Maybe they're at the beach or some other place instead of going. They probably just didn't go. That stat today is completely different, right? Only 14% would not have watched the live stream instead of attending on purpose. Attending in person. That's kind of mind blowing for me to think about, Michael.
Yeah, it is for me too. How quickly that changed. Now, of course, again, necessity is the mother of invention, right? So for several months, this was the only avenue that people had available. So if you wanted to do something related to church, you had to do something online.
Right.
What you don't necessarily know in that statistic is, of those people who did attend some live stream church, you don't know the frequency at which they attended those live streams, and you don't know which church they actually attended, whether it was necessarily the church they're a member of, or whether they took the opportunity to visit other churches online.
Yeah. And that is just that question that, again, we hear circulating about. Are people watching our live streams? Could they be here, but still choosing to watch, what is going on in the lives of people right there. Here's another one that I think this really sets up our conversation this morning really well, Michael. Younger churchgoers, 18 to 29, are the most likely to say they became closer to God, 37%. That's great during this pandemic season. But they're also the most likely to say they're currently questioning their Christian faith. So with everything else that's happening around the pandemic, social, cultural, political, all these other things that are happening, we're really seeing a polarization, really, in some ways, even within this one age group, of faith walking with leaders. Are you seeing and hearing the same thing?
Yes. I think overwhelmingly what we are hearing is that it's just a time of general upheaval in the church for a lot of reasons. Of course, the pandemic, but a variety of other reasons too. So there's this moment, I think, for young adults in particularly, when COVID has given them the opportunity to really step back and stop assuming things that they might have previously just assumed to be true. Now that can have both positive and negative effects depending on what's at the end of that search. But it also puts some of the impetus on us as church leaders to recognize this is happening.
Right.
So what are we going to do in response to the fact that this is happening?
And I would guess that it's not just that 18 to 29-year-olds, although they probably are less set in kind of their adulthood rhythms of faith and church practice. I would venture to say that probably across every age spectrum, there is some degree of, man, COVID helped me grow closer to God, or that COVID season, COVID maybe caused a little distance to come in there. Um, I know this is kind of the heart of what's on the top of your mind right now. How does COVID really kind of play a role in this? I mean, how do we look as church leaders and go, man, this is what COVID did, or this is what happened during this season? Give me a little bit of a sense there, Michael, on some of what you're seeing and sensing as you lead from your role there.
It is. So first of all, it's a tricky thing because the phrase "closer to God" is a little bit ambiguous in the survey.
Right.
So somebody could respond and say, well, COVID helped me grow closer to God, but you don't exactly know what they mean by that. The second reason that it's tricky, and this is really relevant to the conversation that we're having today, is the question is about what happened in terms of your personal relationship with God. The question is not about what happened in terms of your personal relationship with the church. So as a church leader, I think all of us would say that those two things ought to be synonymous with one another, that it's the Lord's design and intent that as we grow closer to him, we also grow closer to the church. We ought to be asking the question if that's actually happening, and if COVID might be sort of a differentiation point where people might say, boy, I really have grown closer to the Lord in the midst of COVID, but I have grown increasingly distant from the church, so that now we're coming into a time where people are able to much more freely talk about their spiritual growth and development apart from the local church in an isolated kind of sense. It's questions like that we need to be asking. And while we can't say with certitude what COVID has done, boy, we'll be reflecting on that for years and years and years. One of the things that I think is helpful for us when we think about the last year to 18 months is to think about the difference between causality and revelation. So those are two really, really different things, right? Here's an illustration that might help. If you can imagine going out to your garage and taking a piece of fruit like an orange or something like that and putting it in a vise, and you start slowly tightening the vise over and over again, it gets tighter and tighter and tighter. Eventually, what's going to happen is that, if it's an orange in the vise, eventually you're going to have orange juice on the floor of the garage. Now, the vise had some measure of causality, but really it's about revelation. The vise didn't cause the juice to be in the orange. It was only the mechanism that was used to reveal what was in the orange all the time. So that's important for us, because if we treat everything about the COVID season as causal, then we'll tend to lose sight of the opportunity before us. Because if it's all causal, that means that once COVID goes away, then everything will return back to normal because the cause has been eliminated. If, however, COVID has revealed much more than it has actually caused, then we've got a level playing field that we can start from. And thinking of it in terms of revelation helps us see one of the gifts, if I can put it that way, that COVID has actually given us. So COVID has taken a lot of things from us. There's no doubt about that. But if it's true that COVID has revealed more than it has caused, one of the things that COVID has given us is this very rare gift of unvarnished truth. So then the question for us becomes, do we actually want to hear the truth that COVID has revealed to us?
That is the leadership question, right? Like, leaders struggle with that. Do I want to know the truth?
Yeah.
Or do I want to continue? I think most leaders really in their heart of hearts want to know the truth. They want to be able to confront it, but they also know that when you face the truth, not only does, as Jesus says, set you free, but it also causes you to have to really, be introspective and think about your leadership in a new way sometimes, or think about those things.
Boy, it does. And that's hard. It also, if you do accept it as truth, it also compels you to action. right? Like,
Yeah.
if you know this is true, then you have to do something. You have to act on it.
That phrase, the rare gift of unvarnished truth. I think that's a powerful phrase. COVID has given us, as much as it's taken away, and there's been a ton of tragedy, as church leaders, we've also been given the rare gift of unvarnished truth. What do you mean by that, unvarnished truth?
So what I mean is that pain in any form, I think, has the unique characteristic and quality of just sort of stripping away
Hmm.
a lot of the defense mechanisms, a lot of the surface level stuff that we might pile on top of true underlying issues. It really gets us down to the bottom. So if that's true, then that COVID has told us the truth, it has revealed some things that might be uncomfortable for us, but nevertheless are true things.
Yeah.
Well, then the next question is, well, what exactly has COVID revealed? And I think there's a lot of answers to that question. I would propose at least these three. So I think
Okay.
these three things at least. Thing number one that I think COVID has revealed is the misunderstanding that many people in our churches have about what church actually is. So if you go back and look at church data over the course of the last 20 years, one of the interesting things that you'll find is that the number of people who are members at evangelical churches, there's not been a ton of fluctuation in that overall number. Now, you might be on the webinar today and you're thinking, well, that doesn't make sense in my context because I've seen, patterns both in our community and maybe even your church where church attendance has dropped. I think what it shows us is that even though there's the same relative number of people, the frequency at which people were attending the church has been steadily dropping. So if I went to my parents, who are close to 70 years old, and asked them about when they were teenagers or even when they were newly married, how many times in a given month did they attend church? They would probably say they were at the church 15 or 20 times a month because they would go twice on Sunday and then again on Wednesday on a weekly basis. If you went to the same average churchgoer today and asked them how many times they attend church in a month, in a non-COVID time, what you probably find is that they're going 2 to 3 times a month. Here's the interesting thing, though, is that those same people who are attending 2 to 3 times a month would also say, and I'm a faithful church member.
Yeah.
So it's like the definition of what being a faithful church member has shifted with the onset of travel ball teams and dance recitals, everything that competes with church. So here again, I don't think what we're seeing is that COVID caused people to drift away from a frequency of church attendance. It just accelerated the trend that was already in place in the culture. So then again, if COVID's telling us the truth and it strips away some of that varnish on the surface, you get down to this point that one of the reasons why people are attending church less frequently at the heart is because of a misunderstanding of what church really is and the role that the church is meant to play, the vital role in every person's, every believer's spiritual growth and development. So there's an opportunity there, if that's true in a local church context, to really go back and just take some time and help redefine for people, this is what the church really is, and this is what the church is really for. So that's one of the things, one of the truths that I think COVID has told us. Here's a second one. I think COVID has revealed the true shallowness of connection inside many of our congregations. I feel this as a church leader, as an elder in our church, that as an elder team, we'll sit around and just almost go through our membership roles and be asking about this person or that person and realize we just don't know. There are these people that had just dropped off the radar. We don't know if they're sick. We don't because there's not that built-in connection moment where you get to see people on a week in and week out basis. This is one of the things that we really ought to pay attention to to make sure that we aren't just assuming that people are truly and deeply connected just because they're showing up. Chances are there's a segment of all of our churches that have just sort of fallen off the radar. And one of the reasons why is because of the relative shallowness of connection that they have with the church body. So that's the second thing that I think COVID has told us the truth about: the misunderstanding of church, the shallowness of connection. And then one more here that I think COVID has told us the truth about. So I think COVID has revealed people's true source of security. Now you got to think a little bit on this one to be able to get there, because again, it's a little bit like peeling paint off a wall. You start stripping it down and stripping it down. Some of the surface level indicators of this would be things like just the seeming desperation inside of people right now that is working itself out in all kinds of anger, just anger. Boy, we're living in such an angry time. I think every pastor on the webinar could probably identify with this. That regularly, when we talk to church leaders, we will talk to them about, the decisions that the congregation has made about masks or not masks, and how that's affected people's temperaments and different things like that. And more times than not, what we're hearing from church leaders is that, we have people that regularly contact us in anger because we are requiring people to wear masks at one or more of our worship service. And then the same church leader will say, we have people regularly contacting us in anger because we're not requiring enough people to wear enough masks at one or more of our worship services. So it's almost like a net zero game, because you've got people angry about this and people angry about that. And then there's a whole other host of other reasons why people are angry. So if it's possible to strip all that down and not just assume that all of the anger is really about masks or the election or about other issues, is there something deeper happening here? I think one of the things that you find at the heart is that people tend to get very, very angry when their true source of security, that they really have put their hope in, when something about that gets challenged. And that's one of the things that we have seen is anger that I would postulate is rooted in the fact that COVID has attacked all of the sources of security that we've put up in our lives, and people are responding with anger. So I'm sure there are others things that COVID has revealed. There's no doubt, right? But these are just three that I think are worth thinking about.
So that, and the image, come back to the metaphor, is when kind of the vice of COVID becomes tightening down on the church, really what we have are these three things that begin to emerge that maybe are surprising for us, or maybe there's something we knew, but Michael just never really had to face or knew how to face before, we started, in this season of this pandemic. Is that, fairly accurate there?
Yeah, for sure. I think so.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we do this in life, but we also do this in leadership, is that we can just sort of roll along with the luxury of living in assumption until something comes and challenges the assumption that we're making. And we don't even realize that we've been making certain assumptions until we can't make those assumptions anymore. And this is a little bit where we find ourselves. But if you do take it as being revelatory, right? If you take COVID as being more revelatory than causal, there's an opportunity that comes with that. If we see these things as validly true, and a host of other things, if we see them as true, then it means that we have the chance to really think deeply about discipleship, because these three things are really about that. I mean, they really are about discipleship, our understanding of church, the way we connect with other Christians, where we put our true security. All those things are really about discipleship at the core. And that makes me think that moving forward, if again, truth compels you to action, that one of the things we ought to be doing is thinking about what discipleship needs to look like in the future in
Mm,
light of these things that have been exposed by COVID. So let me just give you a couple of 2 or 3 of these here too about what discipleship might look like in the future. And friends, I'll just tell you that these are guardrails. They're meant to be broad thinking points to move the conversation along, knowing that in each local congregation, this needs to be contextualized. But let me see if I can give some guardrails here about how to think about it. So discipleship in light of these things must in the future be intentional rather than assumed. But I'd like to put a qualification on this,
okay.
if I could, right? So it seems to me that we need to begin to think about intentional discipleship in more of an agricultural way than an industrial way. So we need to think about making disciples rather than manufacturing disciples. Let me try to flesh that out for a second. There are reasons, I think, that we tend to drift toward an industrial kind of mindset when it comes to discipleship. One is that when you think about it in terms of industry, like almost an assembly line, it's easier, it's cleaner, and it's simpler.
Right.
That you know that if you've got a specific process in place and you just run people down the assembly line, that they're going to come out on the other end fully formed disciples of Jesus. It's an easier, simpler way to do that. If you start to think agriculturally, though, you start to realize that what you're doing in discipleship is really more about creating the conditions rather than snapping widgets onto people as they go on an assembly line. That's what we do in terms of agriculture. Like we want to have the conditions right. We want to have the soil right. We want
Mm,
to have the placement of the garden or the crop in the right place. We want to make sure that we guard against predators that could come in and eat the crop. Like these are the things that we're doing. But ultimately, when you have an agricultural mindset, you recognize that the things that you need most in order to see fruit are things that are completely out of your control. The best you can do is set up the right conditions so that you're able to take advantage of those things that are outside of your control. So some of the implications of that, of it being intentional, but intentionally agricultural rather than industrial, just a couple of implications there would be things like that we intentionally free ourselves and our leaders up for more intentional relational
mm,
investment. I think this is going to be really, really hard as we try to recover from COVID, because what we're all looking for are really task-based kind of systems. And there are certainly those that have to be done, right? Like if you, in your children's ministry, boy, you're going to have to
yeah.
re-recruit a ton of volunteers and run all of those volunteers through background and safety checks. You're going to have to retrain them.
Right.
So there's all these tasks that are there. I would just encourage us as we're coming back to do what we can to not overload ourselves and our leaders with those tasks and still expect the agricultural mindset of disciple making to happen. It might require us to lighten the task load and even rethink job performance deliverables and even job descriptions so that we can think less industrially and more agriculturally.
So good.
So that's the first one, is discipleship's got to be intentional rather than assumed. Here's the second one. Discipleship, in light of what COVID has revealed, it must be about people being connected and not just present. Being connected and not just present. I think that it is unrealistic of us to think that our congregations will return in full after most people are vaccinated and COVID has died down. I think it's unrealistic for us to think that. And the most basic reason for that is that attending church, like anything else, is habitual in nature.
Right.
And now what we've essentially done, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have done it. We had to do it. We needed to do it. What we've done is essentially given permission for people to do what they were already kind of doing anyway, which is a less frequent attendance pattern to the church.
Right. Making value substitutions, some of those
absolutely.
things.
Yeah, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
All those kind of things. So we've got to work really hard then with the people that do come back and making sure that those people are truly connected rather than just presence. Now, there's a deeper issue here, right? There's a deeper issue here than just people's physical presence at a local at a local church's worship service. The deeper issue is that we as a whole, like as a people as a whole, we are less connected with other people than we ever have been before. That's the great irony of our time, is that we are more connected through social media and our phones. So we're more connected and yet less connected at the same time. So think with me for a second here about all the things that in previous days would connect us to each other. So we would be connected, deeply connected with other people based on, where we live or our occupation or our shared interests. All those things would deeply connect us to a people and a place. And then think about this, a few statistics here. According to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, people now change jobs every 4 years. You get a whole job turnover every 4 years. So no longer are our careers, our occupations, a source of connection point for us. According to the Census Bureau, people are going to move entire communities. They're going to move 12 times after they graduate from high school in their lives. So then you don't have any connection to a place anymore. And then you layer in the impact of social media on this. So the social media, you all know that social media is really based on the idea of curated feeds. So if your feed, whether you're on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or whatever, if it's a curated feed, the result is that all of us are constantly living in a state of confirmation bias. So we tend to think that the whole world thinks and looks at things in exactly the same way that we do, because those are the only people that we really are giving ourselves access to. And we wonder why we have a sense of isolation from our neighbors that are around us. It's because if we encounter somebody in the world who has a slightly different opinion than we do, we think, well, that person is a freak of nature because everybody thinks exactly like I do, even though I don't really interact with these people except in this quasi-real environment that I'm in. Now, so if all those things are true, we can either fight this reality, or we can think about it as a baseline and look for tools that intentionally connect people, even if and when they are not present. So this is where you get into the idea about the way that you do small groups, the qualifications that you put on leaders. It needs to be, I think, moving into the future, that we need to, at the same time, help people understand the importance of church attendance. But we also need to recognize that people are going to attend less frequently. So what tools and expectations can we put in the lives of our people and in our leaders' hands to make sure that we're creating real connection with people and not just relying on people being present?
Well, and it strikes me too, Michael, that every other part of our society and our culture is going to be clamoring for people to be present. Restaurants trying to get back to capacity, theater groups, performances, concerts, ball team. I mean, everybody is going to be in this next season going after getting people back in the door and back present to something. And if the church isn't careful, we're going to just kind of seed presence instead of connectedness, and those people will kind of even be pulled even further away than they were during the COVID season, because there is going to be such desperation from these other parts of our culture and society.
That's right. Competition everywhere for those people to
even more than before the pandemic, probably.
Yeah, I think so.
I love that.
For sure.
Okay, what's the third thought there then?
All right, the third one is this: is that discipleship needs to be more about how to think rather than what to think. So it needs to be more about how to think rather than what to think. So if you're a parent on the webinar today, you get this intuitively, because there's a moment when you're parenting your kids that they start to grow, and the way that you parent them has to be about teaching them how to think so that they can make their own decisions rather than just telling them what to think. When they're small children, of course, you want to tell them exactly what to think. That's your job, because the primary role of a parent, when kids are really young, is you just want to keep them safe. Just keep them safe. And so I'm going to tell them what to think. But every year that our kids grow up, the less control that we have on them, and it becomes increasingly important that as they navigate the world themselves, we recognize that they're going to face complex issues, that it's impossible for us to tell them what to think about every single thing that they're going to encounter today. What we need to do then as parents is create a set of lenses for them by which they view the world, so that they can make decisions in real time.
Right.
This is one of the fallacies, I think, of discipleship, that we have tended toward thinking about discipleship in terms of what to think rather than teaching people how to think. So what is true in parenting is also true in discipleship. As people grow in Christ, they need to have their minds transformed, not just their knowledge informed, so that when they go out into the world, they're going to, I mean, they'll see a myriad of things every day that they can't look to the Bible and say that the Bible speaks absolutely directly, clearly to this issue. But if they have the right lenses on, then it's possible for them to know the right way to think about an issue. So let me just give one practical example of what this looks like. So if I were to make the statement that abortion is wrong, probably most evangelical leaders would agree with that statement. And that it's a fine statement, but it is a what to think statement. A how to think statement is not just saying abortion is wrong, but instead teaching people about human beings being made in the image of God. That also has more further reaching implications than to just abortion. It influences the way that we think about social justice. It matters the way that we think about the elderly and the infirmed in our communities. It changes the way that we think about people who have special needs. So teaching that way is a what to think mindset, so that when people face all these individual issues, they have a grid for how to think deeply about those individual issues, instead of just the one what to think kind of statement that is there. So those three things at a minimum, I think, are worth considering when it comes to discipleship, that it's not just assumed, but intentional. Yeah. It's people are not just present, but connected. And that when we think about discipleship, we're thinking about how to think rather than just what to think.
Man, that's so strong. I'm a little distracted making notes, but also trying to host a webinar here, because there's so many great nuggets there, Michael, that have been coming through there. It strikes me though that there's two things that emerge here. One is this takes more time, and as you said, a relational investment greater than just the next program, the next thing, especially when you get into that how to think, what to think. I mean, it is spending time with people and helping them walk through messes and some of those things, not just saying, hey, align with us on this issue and then move forward, or align with us on this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that's exactly right. One of the questions that has been most helpful for me in trying to do this in the discipling relationships that I have is that when somebody comes to you with an issue, to actually ask the question, tell me how you're thinking
Yeah.
about this issue right now, and force them to articulate, like, what are the principles in your mind that you're trying to use in order to help you make this decision. And that can be about anything from an issue in society to like a really practical issue that somebody's dealing with about a new job, or marriage, or whatever. Help me understand how you're thinking about this issue. It also allows you to speak in not a direct answer to the question, but some other principles that ought to form the framework by which they're coming to the answer to the question.
And it is much more that agricultural piece of that. The other thing that strikes me, and this is kind of close to the heart of what we do at Auxano, is that we have to have some sort of framework then to build around. We do have to have those lenses in place organizationally. We have to have those culture building things so that we can still shepherd in a similar direction. Think of a field with sheep in it. We have still some constraints on what's going on, but it's not necessarily a cattle chute where everybody's just kind of walking the same path. And so we kind of frame it up in this way, Michael. We ask, we kind of help churches ask, what's our disciple making mission? So that's what keeps us all pointed the same direction. What are disciple shaping values? What are those shared convictions that guide consistent decision making? What's our disciple moving strategy? So here comes this industrial piece of this where we still need good programs and good activities for people to be a part of. But the agricultural piece is, hey, how do we know this is working? How do we point back to these disciple defining marks as a piece of that? And then we come back to then, okay, so what's the future look like then? And how do we lead people to this? And it seems to me like if we don't have these just, maybe 5 essential questions in place, then it's going to be hard to be very intentional, to really talk about connection. It's going to be hard to get into, how to think and why we think the way we think instead of just what, because we don't really have these shared markers along the way. I don't know if that's resonant at all, but it's kind of makes sense on this side of things.
It does to me. I think one of the other things that it makes it hard to do is it's very hard for us to tell our leaders what exactly they're shooting for in these relationships. Like
right.
what in our church, what do we really want you to do other than just hang out with somebody or a group of people?
Right.
How do you really define the win that are here? It really does help leaders to know clearly this is what we're going for. Now, in an agricultural mindset, it is admittedly more of a winding road to get there, right? It takes more time, it takes more intentionality, but it also takes into account the fact that we are working with people, and people are winding by their very nature.
That's right. Quick reminder, the chat box is open for Q&A. We'll move into that in just a few minutes. So I know that you, like me, have been making some notes and kind of have some follow-up thoughts. If you want to follow up there, hit the chat box. Bob, again, is on the back end doing that. Michael, I love that defining that piece of that. It usually blows leaders' minds or something, when you say something like, well, instead of just telling people to be a part of a small group, suggest and really kind of create a culture where people have a group of what we would call refrigerator friends and that's how our church defines, that connectivity, that doing life, that being a part of other people's lives. It's like, are there people in your life that can walk into your kitchen and open up your refrigerator without having to ask? We have a college small group every Thursday night. So their kids are coming over tonight. The big question every week is, what are we going to feed them? Because that's, the best way to increase attendance in a college small group. But a couple of weeks ago, one of the young women in our group was like, hey, can I get the ketchup out of there? And I was like, look, let me tell you, this is a perfect moment. You can go to our refrigerator and get anything you want out at any time. You don't have to ask. This is why we do life together in small groups. And I think, Michael, if you start to kind of create those pieces with those disciple defining marks, I have refrigerator friends, then we start to be able to see the programs and everything's pointing to like actual success in discipleship, not just, presence, without connectedness and some of those things.
Man, I love the refrigerator image. I think that that's really helpful, and it's something that people can grab onto. What you want, I think what we all want as church leaders is we want a church culture of discipleship and disciple making. We don't want a program. We want a culture. So you want it to be where if someone asked any member of your congregation, who's responsible for discipleship in this church? You want the answer to be, well, we are.
Yeah.
Like you don't point to a staff person. You want people to say, we are.
I'm responsible for it.
Yeah. This is what we do. We disciple each other. We're moving forward together as a congregation. And it's really hard for that to happen without the depth of relationship that you're describing.
And we've found too that the language, that language we share allows the relationship to happen. If you don't have shared language, if you can't speak the same way, if you're not using the same term someone else is, then it's hard. You've ever been in a foreign country, it's hard to go too deep. You can feel a connection, but that depth of relationship requires a shared language where you can communicate with great depth. Hey, let's turn the corner towards home before we get to the Q&A piece of this. For us, there's a link coming up in the chat box. If there's something that's been piqued and interest there, we help churches frame this discipleship mission and strategy all the time, create those markers there. Church Unique is that touch-tone book that forms the core of all we do at Auxano. So that link's coming up in the chat box. Michael, I know through Lifeway and your work there, this Church On initiative is pretty exciting. You guys have some leadership tools and things. Do you want to give us a quick kind of overview of what's happening there with Church On? Is that link comes up in the chat box?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things we want to do as churches really are thinking about how to move forward in the future is to provide some really helpful content and really helpful tools to help them think in the right direction. So if you go to lifeway.com/churchon, what you'll find is, just a host of different resources for all different age groups. And some of them are just general knowledge kind of things, best practices in terms of virtual and hybrid small groups. But then you'll also find really practical things like if you are reopening a kids ministry, here's a checklist that you need to walk through to make sure that you're ready to go. Basically, what we're trying to do with Church On, the sense that we are getting is that church openings are happening and they're escalating right now. You mentioned earlier, how big Easter was for a lot of people. So they're opening more and more and more and more. But what we continue to hear from church leaders is that those openings are going to be slow and steady, but the stake that people are putting in the ground is really the fall. To say in the fall, we plan to be maybe not 100% of our attendance, but we plan to be 100% back operational in some form to the fall. So this side is meant to help in that journey, to help answer the question, okay, if my stake in the ground is in the fall, what do I need to be thinking about in April and in May and June and July in order to move my team to be ready to get there in the fall? So that's what it is, lifeway.com/churchon.
Yeah, I love that. Link is in the chat box there, and great opportunity there to just really, again, Michael, the resources of Lifeway, not just for, I know kind of Southern Baptists, but for, evangelical leaders across the spectrum and being able to lead well in that. And I appreciate you guys working hard and putting those resources out there. One question comes up, if we're kind of been in that industrial mindset, real quick, Michael, and we know now there's a level of conviction about this agricultural way of thinking. What's something you're seeing or something you're understanding church leaders doing to really make that shift? Like, man, we've been so industrial, but man, I'm cut. I know we need to be agricultural. Can you give us a couple of, top line thoughts there?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you might do is some reading that I would give you. Yeah. So there's a very influential book that came out several years ago. It's been really influential to me, and one that I highly recommend that talks about this. It's called The Trellis and the Vine. The Trellis and the Vine is about thinking agriculturally in regard to church ministry and discipleship. It's a great book, easy to read, very helpful. very practical in making that shift. And so I think it's a great book to get and to walk through just with a staff team. So that's one really, really practical thing that I think would be good to try to get everybody just philosophically thinking on the same page. I think another thing that might be profitable to do during this time when churches are really reopening is to begin to put some metrics on your leaders that are less task-based and more people-based.
Right.
So it might be that what a staff team does is says, guys, we've been operating in this industrial mindset. We want to move this way. We recognize it's not going to be like an overnight deal where we just turn this faucet off and this one on, but we want to move that direction. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to require everyone, to set aside 2 hours a week in the middle of a work day to specifically connect with people, just to be relational with people in the congregation, and then by proxy to examine, what 2 or 3 tasks that you're currently doing need to go away in order to free up that period of time, that capacity of time. I think that's something that could be helpful. It's just the evaluation of how much time people are regularly spending on tasks, and then trying to free up a little bit more time for people to intentionally be in relationship with others.
That's great. And I love that resource. It's already in the chat box there. So Bob's already, got that book with authorship up there. So if you want to check that book out there, Michael, I can't say enough about just the great level of thought and challenge you've brought to these leaders here today. And I appreciate some time this morning, but also just the investment in the local church that you and the entire team that you lead at Lifeway, but really the whole team at Lifeway is just, investing in church leaders and the future of the local church in this season. So thank you very much for being with us today.
Man, it's my pleasure. Thank you guys for the invitation. It's great to do it.
It's great to see everybody. We'll see you next month with our next Future Casting webinar. And we hope you have a great rest of your day.